Welcome to Rose City Politics. We are incredibly happy to have the leader of the Ontario Green Party, MPP for Guelph, Mike Schreiner, here with us today. Mike, how are you today?
I'm good, John. Hope you're doing well and staying safe.
Doing as well as can be during this extended gray plus lockdown, stay at home, shelter in place that we're in right now. Hard to keep track of the overlapping layers of it, but doing the best that I can. Thank you so much. Yourself, you're doing well though.
Yeah, no complaints. I mean, like everyone, I'm ready for this pandemic to be over, but I'm lucky that I can do most of my work from home or at Queen's Park, and we seem to have done a pretty good job of not letting any COVID into Queen's Park. But it's a challenging time, and a lot of people reaching out to my office who are really struggling right now.
Can only imagine that the stress of being in a very communal place that has to remain open. Down here, we have to deal with that a lot with our manufacturing sector, for example, remaining open, being essential. I have a very close friend who's been deemed as an essential worker 3 times now during this pandemic, and he laughs because he doesn't quite view himself as essential, but the government does. So kudos to that, I suppose, in one context. But of course, putting aside the jokingness around it, the conversation we wanted to have with you today is around paid sick days and what happens for people that are still working right now. They're not able to work from home. They have to go to these communal settings. And there is a lack of provincial support available for them if they do become sick. The prior Liberal government did introduce paid sick days. That was rescinded by this current government under Premier Ford. He argues, and this government argues now, that the federal government provides enough support for those who are sick, that it's not a provincial responsibility right now. But we are hearing some pushback across the province from obviously various political parties and also from groups supporting workers and just the general public as well. So, as the leader of the Green Party of Ontario, what is your take on, the matter of paid sick days?
Well, we strongly support paid sick days, and I think we should have 10 paid sick days. And just to add to your list, public health officials, as well as Ontario big city mayors, have all come out saying paid sick leave is vital to combating the pandemic. As a matter of fact, the Premier's own head of his public health table, when they were announcing the emergency orders, and was asked, what would it take to, or what's one of the key foundational pieces of containing the virus, and particularly outbreaks in workplaces, paid sick leave was the answer. So why the Premier does not understand this is beyond me. The bottom line is the federal program, while welcome, is completely inadequate. It does, first of all, only pays $450 a week, which is below minimum wage, below poverty level wages. And secondly, it doesn't automatically come in and just be part of your next payroll. You have to apply, and so there's a delay in receiving the funds. And so for a lot of workers, especially low wage workers, that delay, when you're living paycheck to paycheck and you're having to choose between putting food on the table and paying the rent, or not, it's just inadequate. And so that's why we need legislative paid sick leave. And so it's beyond me why the Premier doesn't understand this.
Now, this government is very good at talking a big game, making a lot of noise when it comes to mustering, I guess, just support for the government itself. We saw this yesterday, of course, with lighting a firecracker up the CEO of Pfizer's whatever. But this government is also sitting on billions of dollars that the federal government has provided. What would you do with those billions if you were the premier? And why do you think that our current premier Ford is so reluctant to actually use the money that he's sitting on?
Well, the Premier can talk all he wants about calling other people, and the Premier seems to be very good about deflecting blame for what's happening in Ontario right now. But I would encourage the Premier to look in the mirror and ask himself why over the summer he was sitting on $12 billion that could have been invested in expanding our contact tracing and testing regime to help contain the virus. could have been spent hiring more staff in our long-term care homes. Quebec and BC did it over the summer. Ontario did not. And we're seeing another tragic outbreak among our elders in long-term care. He could have used it to hire more staff in our schools to reduce class sizes to 15, like public health experts recommended, but he did not. He could have used it to bring in paid sick days so we could avoid all of these outbreaks we're seeing in so many workplaces, because so many workers are having to choose between, paying the bills or staying home sick. Those are the actions the premier could have taken to contain the spread of the virus, which would have meant that our economy would be doing better. Instead, he's chosen to hang on to this money for whatever reason, and Ontarians now are paying the consequences of the premier's decision.
Now, looking towards our long-term care facilities as well, we've been seeing some pretty horrifying numbers, some pretty horrifying deaths. I've been referring to it almost as a slaughter of our elderly, seeing the vast majority of our COVID deaths have been coming from them. We do know that a lot of the sources of transmission, or at least I'll say anecdotally, has been coming from workers themselves who have been bringing community spread into it. So I guess in that context as well, could you elaborate a bit upon how essential this paid sick leave is in terms of these deaths that we've been seeing?
Well, absolutely, it's essential. I mean, how many PSWs in particular in our long-term care homes are not earning a living wage? I mean, just a study just came out showing that for a PSW to be able to hit the poverty line in Toronto would have to work over 50 hours a week. So here we have vital essential workers that are completely being underpaid and are being overworked because the premier hasn't hired enough staff for our long-term care homes. These folks are caring for our loved ones, our aunts and uncles, our grandparents, our parents. And many of them are having to choose, if they're feeling a bit sick, they're having to choose between, do I go into work and keep food on the table? Or do I stay home because I might be sick? And for many people, that's an impossible situation. And the other dilemma they're facing, particularly in long-term care, is if I stay home, I know we're so understaffed, my colleagues are going to be even more overworked. So the lack of paid sick leave and the lack of proper investment in staffing levels in our long-term care homes is leading to the humanitarian crisis that we're witnessing. Once again, it's as if the premier didn't learn anything from the first wave of the virus.
Why do you think this reluctance to hiring frontline workers, I guess let's call them, whether it be in long-term care homes or, are in the education sector?
John, the first question I asked when we came back in September to Queen's Park was why the premier didn't spend time over the summer hiring additional staff for long-term care. And I remember Minister Fullerton answered by saying, well, we just can't snap our fingers and hire additional staff. And I was like, that's exactly why you should have been doing it over the summer, like Quebec and like BC, because you're right, you can't just snap your fingers and hire additional staff. And we've seen the tragic consequences of that. And the only thing I can say is obviously Doug Ford has a long political history in believing in austerity. He doesn't believe in government spending on things. And so that's gotten in the way of his approach to this pandemic. And I think it's one of the things that's, driving him to hang on to this money that has come from the federal government that should be spent to protect Ontarians and to help us get us through this pandemic. And unfortunately, the premier's ideology and his commitment to austerity has gotten in the way of actually addressing the crisis that we're all facing.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us about such an important issue. We hope that the next time that we invite you on the show, maybe we'll have something more positive to speak about. But of course, thank you for allowing for our audience to hear your thoughts. This is Mike Schreiner, MPP for Guelph, the leader of the Ontario Green Party.
John, I'd love to come back, and let's come back when we can talk about economic recovery.
There we go. Maybe we can do it face to face and share a pint sometime.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
All the best.
Bye
Cheers.
now.
Thank you.